Scout's honor. Take this string. Tie it around your fingers, a sequence of bow knots, so that you may hold the dead weight of grief from caving in. You are not a sky empty of stars. You have never been. You are but a stretch of skin lit by a constellation of scars, a vessel of stories. You were once complete, then jigsawed into pieces, cast into petrichor, and yes, it hurts. I know. Paper cuts are the worst. But you must always remember, to survive is to solve the riddle. So do your best and find those missing pieces. Dream in ink, invoke in smoke, climb to the highest point, locate the source of your sacred bloodline, then stream it from above. Retrace your steps in the faces of those you have named and loved. Follow the breadcrumbs of bodies you have sculptured into shelters and the nooks that welcomed you home. For you are not alone. You have never been. This you must never forget. They are all there, always there, patiently waiting to be stitched back together again. So go forth, my love, solve yourself. Assalamualaikum, selamat sejahtera. Here's another poem, Dwi Bahasa. Nafasku sengal, sendiku pegal, badanku kebas tapi akalku kekal bernas. Kau gitu ergosam, I think therefore I am so lost, exhausted, overwhelmed. When one part hurts, the body suffers. When said the prophet, peace be upon him. Jadi bila kau marahin dizalimi oleh orang sendiri, could you just imagine the pain? Ia bagaikan ikan dalam keroncong, dituba di kongkong, bersungguh-sungguh para nahoda tanggang. Digunanya sama cara penjajah lama, divide et impera, pecah perintah semua. Setia kawan, sedia lawan, zahirkan pemikiran, tulisan dan lisan. Sila unjuk rasa, kita tunjuk aksi, keramat merdeka, rukun ditepati. And as for me, I'll keep putting these verses where my mouth is, textualizing the body, embodying the words. I believe yang kata yang telus itu tulus dan adanya sakti. This thing that we call spoken word poetry. This piece is titled Moles. By the time I was 10 years old, a considerable number of moles have already made my body and my face their home. I have one on the middle of my forehead, one on the corner of my right eye, one under my bottom lip, one on the left side of my chest, one on my finger, and one on the surface of my soul, the very first one found by my father when I was just 3 years old. And oh, how I dreamt of having these moles falling off me like a hot, sticky day. But unfortunately, these moles have decided to stay. And oh, if I was ever given the freedom to choose, I would have chosen sticks and stones, and I would have let them break my bones, for that would have been better than having those names finding their way to me from Monday to Friday just to hurt and haunt me. So instead, I find shelter in the covers of my imagination, while you can now call it defense mechanism. Like that first time When I saw the face of the beautiful Kuan Yin and the gorgeous green Tara, I knew that just like them, this mole is a third eye endowed with divine power, and if I just closed my eyes and squinted hard enough, I could actually see glimpses of nirvana. And the other time, when I saw the figurine of the sleeping Buddha, I knew that just like him, I could contorted myself in the very same position and try to imagine all those sufferings suffered at school as just facets of samsara. Because this is how one should address their karma, and this is how one should embrace their dharma. And sometimes, Sheena the Muslim would morph into Sheena the Hindu, and I would strut around thinking, this is me with my very own awesome pottu, which is a marking only found on the foreheads of feisty deities. It is a symbol of an ancient civilization, Eastern and almighty, and I would look at those bullies and knew that just like the mighty goddess Kali, I too could dance them into annihilation. See me scatter them like dust with my anger and my wrath. But I wouldn't, and I shouldn't. For I am the Trimurti. I have the beginning, the middle, and the ending inside of me. I am Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. I am creator, preserver, and destroyer. I am divine, thus I am kind. And even though I could not speak Tamil, it's not like I did not give it a try, but that was a long time ago. And now, who knows? I might just remove these moles earlier than I planned to do so. And when the time comes for me to pick them out from my face, I will still stick them in, bury them in, carve them their very own tombstone, because this mole is indeed a third eye, allowing me to see you for who you are, my dear. And that this mole on my right side of my eye has made me see everything with a childlike wonder. And that this mole reminds me to always speak good of others. And that this mole always reminds me to forgive myself and everybody else's errors. And that this mole gives me poetry when normal speech would not work at all, and that this mole on the surface of my soul have brought me to all those places I have arrived and departed from, and that this soul underneath the surface of my moles have brought me into the arms of all those I have loved wholeheartedly, with all my body, with all my soul, and my considerable number of moles.
Welcome back to Knots FM, everyone. This is the first episode in a new collaborative series between us, Knots FM, and LADS, the Literature and Drama Society, where we invite poets to recite and perform their poems. The 3 pieces performed just now were performed by the wonderful Sheena Baharudin. So, Sheena, what inspired you to write those 3 very diverse poems?
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for having me. And that is a good question to start, I guess, Tristan, because what I shared earlier are basically 3 variations of performance poetry. And for example, the poem Moles was inspired by my own experience. Obviously, everything is based on my inspired by my own stories. But the poem Moles, which is a standard around 3-minute long performance poem, that was inspired by what I experienced back in high school when I was bullied simply for looking like how I look like. And it took me a while, because I think for many years that feeling has simmered for quite a long time, and I finally found a way to express myself. So that was a very cathartic experience, and that's Moles. When it comes to the piece that had the music in the background, that is the sort of poem that was shared online specifically for social media, and that was inspired by a lot of things that I was experiencing around me, specifically during the time when we were all stuck at home. Right? So there's a lot of anger there, so I wrote that. And last but not least is that piece titled Scout's Honor, and that was actually inspired by a collaboration that I did with a fellow artist, but she goes by the name of Mira Amin, and she is a surrealist painter. So she shared with me her stuff, it's a project that she had, and the poem came out from that collaboration. So that was fun.
All right. So let's just talk a little bit more about molds. So you mentioned that it was from your experiences in high school. So on
primary school, actually.
Primary school. Okay, yeah. So it goes way back. So when did you first get the idea to, like put it down on like a piece of paper? Yeah.
Well, to put it down on paper, probably when I was around 21 years old. And that was the beginning of me, not to say forcing myself, but basically finding the courage to perform. And I didn't start with poetry. I started with theater first.
Right.
And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm okay with assuming a persona. But there are so many stories of my own, and I've always loved poetry. And I finally learned that there's this thing called spoken word poetry where it merges both. So yes, 21 years old was the first time when I started learning about spoken word poetry, not officially or professionally. And then I started writing the story down and using verses.
So it was more of like a hobby at first, and you were just sat, I guess.
It was an obsession, Tristan. I'm a full-on nerd. I've been reading poetry since I was a kid.
Okay.
I've always loved it. Yeah.
So you were doing this in your bedroom. So how did you eventually work up, the courage to bring it onto like a stage or a gig, for example? Like, how did you build that confidence?
Would you believe me? And I've asked this question before, but if I were to tell you that I am an introvert, I am very shy.
I believe you, yeah. A lot of artists are, but still somehow you manage to deliver with a lot of passion. So I'm just wondering how you managed to break out of that mold,
I have no idea, because every single time right before performing, and I think you saw a little bit of that, there's a lot of pent up energy, and it comes from anxiety. But I guess after doing this for several years, you find a way to sort of shed off that energy, probably like jumping here and there, and then keep on reminding, like for me, I have to remind myself over and over again that the words that I say matter, and that there is someone out there who needs to hear it and feel less lonely than before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when was your first performance? So you started at 21 years old. So I'm assuming you performed like somewhere close to that, like 22, 23?
No, when I was 21 years old, I started writing.
Okay.
With the intention of performing it. But as somebody who has stage fright, it took me a couple of years before I finally had that courage to step on the stage, and I had to force myself. And what do I mean by that? In 2008, between 2008 and 2009, British Council started bringing in spoken word poets from the UK, and they conducted workshops. And by then, I already knew a few people in the indie poetry scene. So they were the ones who told me about this workshop and invited me to join. And it started from there.
Right.
And when you do a series of workshops on spoken word poetry, you really have to try your poems out on stage. There's no other way to do it, right? It's not like you're writing a poem in your diary and you go like, nobody's going to see this except for my best friend. No. It's designed for the stage. So that was, I guess I was 24 at that time. So it took a while, and I finally got up there, and it was a nightmare. It was a full-on nightmare. It was really, really scary. It just started off just performing at a workshop to performing and competing in a slam, which was a causeway slam that was between poets from Singapore and Malaysia. The first slam ever in Malaysia.
Did you win?
Of course not. Of course not. I bombed so bad. But that didn't stop me, because I love it so much, and I'm really happy I didn't stop back then. Yeah.
Well, I guess I just want to ask like a follow-up question to that. Like, do you see your quote unquote, failure is a really strong word, but like these small little hiccups that you have, like let's say maybe your first gig didn't go too well, or you messed up at like a show somewhere, like do you look back on those times as like oh yeah, I screwed up like 5 years ago, but like do you look at that for motivation? Do you look back and say like, wow, I've grown a lot from that point of view? Like how do you look at previous I guess, mistakes or, you know, hiccups through your life?
Well, I guess, you know what, over the years, I have found myself being extremely hard on myself when it comes to making mistakes. And I would remember if I forgot a line, or if something happened somehow and it didn't go with my plan, right, with what I had in mind, I would beat myself, like in a sense that I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I didn't sleep back then because I keep on worrying about saying the wrong things or doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
But those were back when I was still in my 20s. And now that I am in my 30s, I look back with much fondness and amusement.
Yeah.
And also, it's nice. It's a story to tell, isn't it? Because if everything is just peachy
and perfect,
what is there to tell? Nobody wants to hear that. People want to hear about the struggle that you had to go through. This is not something that is easy to basically bear, you know, to be vulnerable and bare your soul on the stage and just share something that you've written and it's based on your own experience, right? For example, recently I was in this theatre production at 𝐏𝐴𝐿 and this was the plan, that I was going to perform my piece and they're going to project these images behind, right? And it was the opening night and the projector didn't work.
Okay.
It did not work and I was in the dark and all that they could see was just I guess a silhouette of me and then it's just me performing. If it was me 5 or 10 years ago, it would crush me.
Yeah.
Right? I wouldn't be able to get over it. Now, when that happened, and after the whole show ended, I just went to the stage manager, and the stage manager was in quite a state, and he was apologizing profusely, and I just told him, it's okay. Things happen.
Yeah.
Then we'll try again tomorrow. And everything was okay after that.
Yeah.
So yes.
I think that is something that a lot of our listeners should take away, whether you're a poet or, you know, like a musician, like there will be hiccups.
For sure.
Like from my experience, I've played a couple of live shows, and this was at a time where I wasn't very good, but I was, you know, telling myself, like, okay, Tristan, you gotta get better at guitar.
Yeah.
So and I was really like micro-analyzing every single mistake that I did, but
exactly.
And it can get quite toxic, you know. It's like you beat yourself up for really, really little things, and sometimes it's not even things that people notice, you know. It's like people are like, Tristan, you didn't miss a single note at all, or like people won't notice.
We are our worst critic, aren't we?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, to any of our listeners out there, like if you're feeling really I guess insecure, or you're really like feeling really paranoid, like, oh, what if I mess up? Just go out, have fun, because art is about expressing yourself and having fun.
And really being in the present is an interesting.
Yeah.
And like what you said, right? And I mean, based on your own experience, you really, like you said, you micro-analyzed everything, and you thought that the audience could only see imperfection.
Yeah.
But I have been in many situations, and I think that's the same thing that happened to you, where the audience doesn't know. They didn't know. They was just enjoying your presence and what you're sharing.
And I think because like a lot of the time it's like the first time that people are hearing it, compared to someone who recites at home and really knows every single note or every single word of their poetry. So they don't know that something's missing, while you're like, oh, I missed this note. And yeah. So true. Yeah. I guess from there, like, we can talk a little bit more about expressing yourself and being a bit more vulnerable. But how important is it to you in channeling all of your trauma is in the right word, experiences and you know, like inner emotions? Like, do you treat it as a therapeutic kind of experience, like writing or performing poetry? Like, do you see it as a way to vent? Do you see it as a way to you know, calm down after a really tough day?
It depends on the poem. And what I meant by that is there are poems that come from a place of anger, So by writing it out, you're, like you said, you're venting it out, and then you feel a little bit more calm, right? It's almost as if you're going to the gym and you just run and run, right? And do whatever that you need to do, and everything's great. But there are also poems that when the first line comes to me, it's very calm, it's very peaceful. And there is this sense of wanting to share it with another, like a secret, but you're sharing it with an audience.
Yeah.
So different poem brings a different sort of process. It involves a different process as well as intention. So yes, intention has always been very important to me. Like, what do I want the audience to feel? What do I want to share, and try to do it as honestly as possible.
Yeah. So just to build off that, like, how important is it in writing, like, you blending multiple languages together? Like, is it an artistic choice to you? Well, this is, again, to give context, right, Tristan? When I first started out, back then, I didn't know what spoken word poetry is, right? I just know about poems that are recited and shared, by other poets as well. That's the only thing that I knew. And then I went on YouTube, and back then, YouTube was, if you were to watch those clips now, it's all blurry, it's so pixelated. 240p.
Exactly. But those are the ones, and I had to wait for it to load and then watch it. But a lot of my references back then were poets that were featured on this show, and it's called Def Jam Poetry. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but Mos Def, the hip hop artist, was the host of this show. And those are the ones I watch. So in the very beginning of spoken word poetry, at least for me, my involvement in it, I sounded full on urban and American and almost African American.
So you were really influenced by that.
I was very influenced by that. And I still remember one of the criticism that was given to the spoken word poetry community back then is that, why do they sound more American or more British than more Malaysian? More local. So that was my decision. I made the decision that I'm going to find my voice. Right? And it has to start somewhere. So it starts with the ones I hang out with, and the language that I speak, my mother language, and everybody else's mother language. And just over the years, I felt much more and more comfortable incorporating other languages in there. So is that is it a strategy? Is it a creative sort of decision that I've made? Yes, for sure. Will I be sticking with it? Right? That's another question, right? I don't know.
Okay. How long did it take you to kind of find this voice of yours? Like, I think you're pretty unique. Like, when people hear you perform, it's like, that's Sheena. How long did it take for you to refine that voice of yours and like get comfortable with incorporating different languages and all of that? I don't actually right now. I mean, the fact that you're asking me this question, and it's getting me, like, I'm thinking at the moment. Was there ever a point where I sat down and went, I found my voice, I'm good now? Never. So
never.
It's still,
it's still a process. It's still a journey. Like I said, I have no idea 5 years from now what it will look like. Okay. I think that is a very good mindset. You're always open to growing and changing, because I feel like if you're an artist in any capacity, like if you just say, yep, I'm done, and you stop being creative, it's just like, right. What's the fun in that? I mean, you don't push yourself. I always want to push myself, and I think to be complacent, right? Is it complacency? Right? Complacent is the worst thing that can happen to an artist, right? When you think that you are good enough. Whoa, that's scary.
When you stop exploring, that's when you just kind of lose all of the magic to you, and then everything sounds the same, and it becomes a cliche. And okay. I guess since we were talking about inspiration and influences, we are currently in a lot of political turmoil. I'm not going to specify which side Not FM and Sheena sides with. So this is a very ambiguous question. But how important do you see? I mean, sorry, I can't speak. How important is poetry in shedding light on, like political issues, social issues, and other controversial stuff?
how important is poetry?
Yeah, in the sense, like, how important is it in communicating that to people who've never been exposed to it? So,
Oh, wow. I don't think that, we should limit ourselves to just poetry, because I've always believed that art is critical.
yeah,
When it
For
comes
sure.
to shedding light
yeah,
to whatever issues that a country is facing. And thanks to social media, I feel that art has become much more accessible. Because if we were to look, at least in terms of the state of our country in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, the artists have always been there. But I do feel that the reach out has been limited to a certain extent.
it's like a bubble in a way,
Exactly.
right?
They are in their own bubble, and it's also because, limitations, right? In terms of poetry, it's already such a niche.
Yeah.
Same thing goes with niche when it comes to music. Then you have mainstream music and you have indie music as
Yeah.
well. Everything is pretty much the same. But now that we are in a state where people's access to information and other forms of media, other forms of self-expression, it's so wide and limitless by now
Yeah.
that I feel that art has become even more critical.
Yeah, for sure.
Critical, integral to whatever that we're going through. So yes, to your question, yes, very much. But it's also very important. I always feel that it's also very important, and that's only because I'm an educator, right? That it's not just doing it, producing your own art, but it's also to get those who are on the receiving end to learn how to do it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that's for me, at least, because there has always been an understanding, this sort of assumption that those who do poetry are just of a certain breed of people. And
Yeah.
I feel that that's not the case. That's not true.
Anyone can be a poet.
Anybody can be a poet, but you just have to put in
The work.
the work.
Yeah.
Doesn't come easy. The same thing, when it comes to music. I can't just come out of nowhere and say, I'm going to be a musician and I'm going to be just as good as you, Tristan. No, I have to put in the work. I need to learn how to do
Yeah.
it. Same thing.
I was just having this conversation with a friend. He's a guitarist as well. He's actually the guitarist in my band.
Yeah.
And we both just kind of agreed that no one's really born with any kind of artistic talent. It's just that they have this drive and this like passion in them. It's like, I want to do this, I want to get good at this. So they just put in hours and hours, and people don't usually see that, right? Like
Right.
people only see you performing on stage for, let's say, 30 minutes, 10 minutes.
Right.
And they just see that. And I think since you mentioned social media, like a lot of people just look at that perfect finished product.
Correct.
So yeah, there really is a lot of work being put into, getting to that point. And I don't think that anyone should be disencouraged because they see someone who's better than them. They
Yeah,
should see
for
it as
sure.
like, wow, that guy put in the work, So yeah, moving back to that whole controversial points thing, like, do you feel that as a woman in the patriarchy, like in a very patriarchal society, do you feel that a lot of your poetry reflects on that?
For sure.
Because I mean, I've read some of it, and a lot of it is quite feminist, like in its viewpoint. There was this one poem about hantu tetek.
Oh yeah, mother. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just like talk a little bit more about that, like how,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know if you are aware of this, or the ones who are listening right now, if you are aware of it, but when spoken word poetry first came to KL, basically the majority of the poets, the new ones at least, the ones who are learning, they were all women, really. And I think it has something to do with finally having this space where you can express yourself,
Yeah.
because out in the real world you have been silenced so
Yeah.
many times, right?
sure.
And over the years there is still this dominance of women's voices in performance poetry. And where I come from, and again, it's not something that came out of nowhere. I felt that I made that decision to stop performing because I felt that, I don't know why I feel, how do I say, scared to speak out. I'll see somebody else speaking up, and then they just say whatever it is that they say, and then why am I thinking too many things, I think too much. So I force myself to go on that stage to tell my story, because there's a lack of representation, especially in literature and in the arts. There are more men than women.
Yeah.
And instead of just, of course we can see it, but there needs to be also a point where you realize, or you make that decision that, you know what, I see the issue, I'm going to say something about it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. And to tell that story. And all of my poems, because I wrote them and I come from that world and that having that perspective, I wouldn't call my works feminist. It's just basically my story. It's my experience. It's just that others have identified and labeled them as feminist.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the community was quite tight knit. Like a lot of you guys are women, right? So is like do a lot of the other poets share similar views with you?
Oh, of course not.
Sure.
No, of course not. Everybody has their own point of view.
Yeah.
However, there is a group out there, and this is a group that I've worked with for years. They were once known as Poetry Cafe KL, and then now they're known as the MPS, or My Poetry School.
Okay.
And these are the ones whose way of looking at things are quite similar to my own beliefs and principles. And one of it is that we perform poetry as a mean of finding ways to change society for the better, and basically to talk about important things. Issues is not just about the personal, because the personal is political.
Yeah.
So it's a very specific way of utilizing poetry.
I believe that everything is political personally, because like if you don't speak about it, you are playing into the what's it called, being neutral, and that doesn't really benefit anyone aside from, let's say, the oppressor or whatever. So I mean, I'm really happy to know that there's some form of solidarity there, and there's this semblance of a safe space. Like earlier on, you mentioned that a lot of the creative scene can be dominated by men. So I think this is really true for music, especially, because like girls are like, no, you can't play death metal or anything.
Really?
Because
okay.
It's like, I mean, there are a lot of like societal barriers to, let's say, if you want to have like a female vocalist for a death metal band or something, like there are so many barriers, like not just in this country, but like social stigma and all of that. And I feel that because of that, the local scene kind of becomes like a sausage fest. Sorry for being so graphic, but like it's really dominated by men, and it kind of creates this it's not really a safe space, because it's not really a safe space, but it kind of becomes like an echo chamber for men. And just to wrap up this really, really long point, I feel that a lot of men, especially, when someone, like specifically like a woman, comes in and points something out, like, hey, this is an issue, like you guys are being sexist, or like it, like toxic masculinity and all of these different problematic views, and I mean even like racism and stuff like that is quite prominent in the Malaysian metal scene. I feel that art doesn't really become a safe space anymore because of these reactionary voices, and a lot of the times the what's the word, the artists who really want to speak out against issues kind of get pushed into like an even smaller niche.
You know what, like this is a very interesting point that you're making, because I guess we can have that conversation now. I didn't know that about the music scene, right? But yeah, there will be spaces even in the poetry scene where you will see just a group of people, and then they have one sort of a mindset, right? An ideology. And it becomes an echo chamber where I support you, you support me, until there is a voice of dissent. And then it becomes an issue, right? I come from a perspective that I always believe that life is not safe. There's for me, safe space is something that you really have to work hard
Yeah.
on establishing that, because there's trust involved
Yeah.
as well.
Everyone needs to be like holding each other accountable and all of that. Yeah.
Accountability, and also to allow dissent, because I always think, and I believe it still, that arts is the voice of dissent.
Yeah,
Really.
for sure.
Right? Because that's the only way that we can change for the better. The minute when the voice of dissent is silenced, then we have an issue.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't go up to that point, lah.
Yeah.
So to have that in the music scene, that's really sad. But I feel that it's a phenomenon that is happening in all scenes.
Yeah.
Really, regardless of the genre. Exactly.
I think specifically it's like a lot of people fall for the anti-SJW, like anti-liberal thing.
Exactly.
And it's like, if you even mention like feminism or gay rights or anything, it's like, oh, get all this liberal stuff out of here, you know, like this is the metal scene, we're men, and it's really kind of cringy.
That's so strange.
Yeah, it's really strange, because at least the way that I see metal, it's like it's already not conforming to society.
Right.
It's loud, aggressive music, and a lot of the lyrical themes in the past have been reflective of war. Like Black Sabbath has a song called War Pigs, and it's
Oh my
calling,
God, I love Black Sabbath.
so it's, I mean, that in its own is political, right? And I don't see why we're just limiting it to, let's say, war or religion. Like you can use intense music as like a platform to talk about, let's say, social issues like related to trans women or women, or
of course,
you know, like any marginalized group, right? But people are just so restrictive, and they're like, no, it's not manly.
And then they start classifying things and labeling things. That's not the way to go.
It's really counterproductive.
It is.
And,
it is. I agree, and I think that, you know, it's sort of coming back to poetry, you know, at least because that's what I do, right? But I don't want to limit myself to just doing poetry, you know, like probably like I don't know, maybe next year we'll see if because you mentioned about it earlier off recording lah, that maybe I should try out music, and maybe I should.
Maybe you should. I mean,
I should. Why should I label myself just as a poet and nothing else, you know? No, of course not. It's part of growth as well. And the same thing, like what you've mentioned, I think there is always this inclination to feel comfortable in a place where you know how things are done.
Yes.
Art is about feeling uncomfortable and making others feel uncomfortable as well.
Trying out weird stuff and making other people feel weirded out. I mean, it just results in change. You know?
What was it? There's a quote out there that art is supposed to comfort the oppressed and then make the ones in power uncomfortable. Something about that. But basically going straight for the status quo.
Yeah.
You know,
I really like that quote. It really resonates a lot with me. Damn. Okay. I mean, that was really, really interesting, because I thought that it was primarily a music problem, but it happens in the poetry. And
of course.
And now that you mention it, I think it mentions in any kind of art scene as well.
Any kinds of art scene,
there'll always be some reactionary person who wants to uphold the status quo.
Exactly.
There'll be some enlightened centrist, or like, you know.
Of course.
Damn. But I guess we can kind of move on to the creative process. Just just revisit it. How has that been affected by the pandemic, personally? Because a lot of artists have hit, you know, writer's block, and they aren't really finding inspiration from. I mean, because when I was a musician, a tour, you know, quote unquote touring, like I was playing gigs here and there, it's like I would get inspiration from playing in different places, listening to different bands, and I think as well as, you know, similarly as a spoken word poet, you would go to gigs and you would kind of pick up little bits and pieces from everyone else, and you would have this scene where you would be inspired by everyone else around you. And when that pandemic first hit, how did that affect you?
Wow. When it first hit, the thing that affected me the most is the fact that I had to teach online, right? So that took a lot of my energy, because you know, when you are in a classroom, it's really basically an exchange of energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're looking at the person's, expressions. It's the same thing as performing on stage. If there's no one around you and you go like, what's the point of me performing? Because if there's nobody listening. And that took a lot of my time. So the first year, I wasn't really writing a lot. But after that, I think there was a shift of perspective. I had the opportunity to go inwards.
Right.
Okay, does that make sense?
Finding yourself in a way.
Yeah, in a way, but it's really to start asking questions that maybe I never really thought about before. An example would be, if I had no audience, I can't go for gigs, right?
Yeah.
Then how can social media be an avenue for me to still perform and to still connect?
Yeah.
Right? So that's the reason why I started sort of working on things called what I would refer to as multimedia poetry.
Yep.
So instead of thinking that there is a big difference between a phone screen, the screen of a phone, or a desktop screen,
and
or a
hall.
laptop screen, and a hall, as well as a stage 4x4, all I need to do is just think of that Instagram or Twitter, whatever it is, as a stage of its own.
Yeah.
So I had to tweak. I had to be uncomfortable. I had to learn and break down things that I thought I knew and build it up again.
Yeah.
So that took a lot of my time as well. I was full on inspired. In fact, I was writing one poem a day.
Wow.
Until I was exhausted. I'm like, I need to give myself some time to take a breath, take a breather. But yeah, so the first half was really bad. But it's not bad in a sense that I didn't learn new things.
Yep.
But the fact that I was much more concerned with teaching and students and making sure everything is okay. And that took away the time that I needed to be creative with my own work.
because being an educator online, it's like you would think that it takes less time, but it takes more time, doesn't it? Like,
double if not triple the time. Exactly.
Yeah. So
because there's no more line, right? You don't drive back home. Your home becomes a place where you work at as well. But I mean, it was a huge learning curve. I don't know about you. Like, how was it for you as an artist?
Well, I mean, I from my experience, it's like when I first joined my band, this was in 2019, I was still really new. Like, it was my first band ever, right? And I was still trying to find my voice. And I managed to find one side of it, because like we were playing metal, and I was like, okay, I've got this influence from Def, Opeth, Gojira, but being locked up at home and not being able to play with those guys was like, okay, I listen to a lot of different types of music, so what can I do that is different from my band? And I do have my own solo stuff that I worked on for a year. I mean, I think most of our listeners know that I released an EP. I can't stop talking about that.
I need to listen to that one. Like
yeah,
EP?
I'll send it over to you. But yeah, I mean, it was an opportunity to explore something new. It did take a lot of time though. Like there were extended periods of time where I was like, damn, I can't fucking write anything, Right. It's like nothing was translating. It just didn't feel right. There were songs that I had half finished and I could only finish it a year later.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of starting to find my own voice now. I found my groove a little bit, but then again, I don't want to get too comfortable in what I do. I always want to try something new. So it's like, how do I blend the happy music with the death metal stuff? Like, what is the in between? So it's all this experimentation, and it was really, really hard for me. Specifically last semester, that was like around March, because I had a whole bunch of assignments and I had MPU as well. So there were like 5 essays that were 2,500 words or something like that. And I just had no time for music. But after that, it's like the inspiration came after getting through those obstacles. It's like after going through all that stress, I wrote a really relaxing thing just to calm myself down. And once it was all over, like I was ecstatic, I was super happy, and I wrote a really upbeat song. And that's where I get my inspiration from. Like, if I'm not going out, it's probably like getting a bad exam result, I'm like, damn, this really made me fucking angry, and then I just write like a really angry song or something like that.
Right. So it becomes a space for you to basically express yourself, right? Whatever that you're feeling. I agree. I mean, for me, during the summer break, I finally had that space. I was in a space where I can create and then collaborate. But regardless, right? Nothing can replace that feeling of performing live.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing. And I really, really miss it. Can't wait after this.
In my experience, I produced everything at home, so I have this tiny little box. And I just record all of my guitars through it, and it's cool because you get to jot down ideas on like basically like the equivalent of like a piece of paper for you, right? But you don't get to feel the air moving. You don't have a real drummer with you. Like you don't feel the atmosphere, and it's like it's good. It's like you're able to like jot down ideas and like figure out harmonies and like really write everything on the spot. But it's like there's a really different feeling compared to playing live and like interacting with, let's say, your band members or even the audience, and just it just doesn't feel.
It does. It feels a little bit. What was the word for it when it just feels. What is it when you go to a hospital, right? It feels just like that's the word. It's okay.
Yeah.
That word is just somewhere floating about.
It's somewhere.
Let it be there.
Personally, I would describe it as feeling alienated because
really?
I'm just locked in my room, and it's good because you're alone with your thoughts, but that's also a bad thing sometimes.
Yeah. For me, it's different. It's just that, like I said, there is no energy exchange.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's the same feeling that I have when I'm maybe rehearsing by myself in front of the mirror. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
I don't know, like do you have any tips, like or is there anything that you go to when you're stuck? Because for me, I've tried to go and develop some stuff in the past, like I should just listen to different kinds of music, but even that feels forced to me. And I don't know if there's like anything that you do that like helps you break out of that writer's block. Thing.
The one thing that I've been doing for a while is to work with artists from that works in other disciplines.
Yes.
Yeah. That really helps with the writer's block. Like artists, musicians, dancers, and then this coming end of the month, really, I'll be in Langkawi for this show, and it's called.
Oh, you have a show?
Yeah, I have a show. Yeah, and end of November, I'll be in Langkawi, and I'm working. I don't know whether if you know her, but she is Takahara Suiko. So she is a songwriter, indie, and everything. So she does music, and that's just one of the ways that I need to get out of my space. That space of thought, and it's going to be really cool because it's full on collaborative. And I think where we are right now, collaborative has always been the way, and collaborative is the way to go. So for example, I'll be more than happy if we can collaborate. That's what I'm saying.
That would be amazing. I don't know how it would work, but I get what you mean. It's like you're speaking different languages, basically, right? And I guess from my experience, like being a musician, it's like they're like even the people that I work with, like we all enjoy similar things. It's like we all like Metallica, we all like Slayer, Gojira, but then on the side we all listen to like different things, right? And that gives us a very like different perspective when we go and look at something. So when we collaborate, it's so much better than just being your own set of influences or anything.
Exactly.
I went to an art gallery in Pavilion. It was a really small one, and there were a lot of cool pieces. I mean, some of them were a bit too esoteric for me. I'm a bit of a pleb, but like seeing some of those pieces really did inspire me. I went home. I wrote something really cool, and I wasn't even talking to anyone. So I think one thing that has kind of helped me was, like you said, either interacting with different artists or just
interacting with the art.
Yeah.
Right?
Interacting with the art. Like, movie soundtracks are.
Oh yes, for sure.
The Thing by John Carpenter, like the movie. I think
The
it's
Thing.
19. Yeah,
That's an old movie.
Yeah, it's
You
a
like
very
that? I
old
haven't
movie.
watched that movie, by the way.
The soundtrack just like envelops you, and it's so creepy. It's so
Ooh, I
mysterious.
love horror.
Yes, it is. It is a really good
is it a
horror
scary
movie.
movie? Okay,
yes,
I
yes.
should go and watch it.
But
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. It's like it really puts you in this like headspace, and sometimes I'm like, damn. A fucking movie did that to me. I should be doing that with my music.
There you
know?
go,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, do you ever like look up to artists in like different not genres, but different fields of expertise? Like, let's say, do you look at someone who's an illustrator, someone who's a musician? Like, what are some traits that you really admire about them?
You know what? That's the thing. For me, what I admire, like the ones that I really admire, are the ones who are really not afraid of just working from outside of the box, you know, and just talk about things and address things that people basically avert their eyes and don't want to address. I
Yeah.
like it. I really like it. What's the name of that? There's a Japanese illustrator, and he is full on. Is it Junji Ito?
Junji Ito, yes.
Oh my lord!
His stuff is so gory.
It's so gory, but I
yeah.
can't take my eyes away from him, and I like that, and I like the fact that they are just people who are individuals and artists. They're shy, but when it comes to their art,
It's just full blown.
blown contrast. Those are the things that I look for, and I also look for artists, like I said, who are not afraid to piss people off.
Yeah.
I am all
Yeah.
for that. So, for example, would be like one of my favorite artists, from my favorite poets of all time, is 𝐂𝐿𝐴 Benjonet, who is a Malaysian poet, and he has pissed off so many people, and I think, you know, he is somebody that I look up to, because there are moments that I still find myself thinking maybe I shouldn't write this because I'm gonna get myself in trouble.
I'm gonna get arrested or something.
Yeah, not that
Yeah.
I haven't gotten myself in trouble before with my poetry, but like, do I want to
Yeah.
do this? Right.
For me, I look up to Fahmi Reza quite a bit.
Fahmi Reza?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's really, really pushing against
Yeah.
a lot of things that I won't say. But
Right.
yeah, I really look up to that. And one of my friends, the other guitarist in my band, who also started a side project because of the quarantine.
Yeah.
His name is Harish. His alias is Iravu. I'll
Okay.
be interviewing him tomorrow right here,
Nice.
actually.
Okay.
Listen to that if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes some things very specific. It's called anti-fascist black metal.
Wow.
So a lot of the lyrical themes are, you know, very anti-authoritarian and just anti-fascist in general. So he has some songs about the oppression of Indians in the past. I won't say in which country. He has a song about work and how work is bullshit and you have to devote your time to it, you know. And
Right.
it's like, I find genres like that really interesting because specifically if it comes from a marginalized
Yes,
community,
correct.
it's like you aren't exposed to these problems in your own little bubble, or I guess in a way your own safe space. Like I would consider myself like a quite a privileged guy, you know, like I'm like middle class, and the fact that I can make music at home is
Right.
already a really big privilege. But
It is,
but then
yeah.
when I like hear from like different artists who have so many different backgrounds, it's like not only do I get inspired, but I learn a lot as well. It's like his music and his experiences is just like, damn, this shit happens, man. Like it just doesn't feel real to us sometimes, and a lot of the times it makes you feel uncomfortable, you know. It's like you said, like it just doesn't make you feel right. It's like sometimes your gut instinct is to react to it and like try and discredit them, like, oh, you're just full of shit, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I like listening to music and basically look at any form of art that provokes me.
Yeah.
You know, because having something that's very monotonous, very boring,
Correct.
and not
Yeah.
very, you know.
And I'm easily
Yeah.
bored, so
Yeah.
I need to find things to stimulate, right? Exactly. Good to know that I'm not the only one. That's great.
I think a lot of people tend to shy away from that, especially with like music, because you know, like a lot of the more expressive forms of music are sometimes more aggressive as well. So it's like, no, I don't want to hear loud drums or anything. So yeah, a lot of people don't break through that barrier, and they don't see, you know, real forms of expression, you know, about struggles and stuff. So yeah, to all of my listeners, please listen to please listen to
I love it how Tristan is that.
So yeah, I think it's just really important for an artist to not only create but to rebel as well.
Of course.
And I think that is a really big overarching theme of this episode, is that rebellion is cool.
Yeah. It is. I think it's very important to question and not just accept everything as, you know, that is just something that you have to accept.
Yeah.
You can question.
Yeah. One more thing about my friend is that he was talking to this local musician about it, and he's like, yeah, I'm writing anti-fascist metal, and he's like, bro, won't that piss off the fascists? Like that's the point, you know.
Right.
The point is to have some sort of counterculture. Yeah.
And I think that counterculture will always be around. There is going to be somebody who will say, no, I disagree with that, I don't like that, we need to do something about it, change it up. That's just I always feel that, and just teaching literature, that's what I've learned as well, is everything is just cause and reaction, you know, cause effect, action, reaction. That's how we work. But to be in a place, like I said, where you are just comfortable, I think when you are comfortable, that's when you need to ask yourself what sort of like what's going on.
I feel like a lot of, I mean, it's really understandable. It's like you just take shelter.
And it's okay.
I mean, because it's really comfortable, you know.
Of course.
There was a point in time where I was extremely racist, extremely misogynistic. I was basically every horrible thing you can imagine, and putting in the work to change that it's really tiring, you know. And especially when you, like, I was a musician, and I was surrounded by like people who were challenging my, like, a lot of my views. It's like I wanted to be in that circle, but to be in, I wouldn't say I had to conform, but I had to unlearn a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, that was a really, 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 really hard point in my life, where I just had to basically change my grammar. Grammar vocabulary. Yeah. And yeah, it was really, really, really tiring.
You're a poet, Tristan. Oh, you know which word to go for.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's all that I really want to talk about for
we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have covered a lot.
We went like everywhere, and we came back. Lovely. Yeah.
Man, let's see. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, that you want to plug? Let me just go through some of my questions here. I think I've pretty much exhausted everything here.
Yeah,
is there anything you want to plug, or anything you want to talk about?
No,
your social media?
Okay, social media. Okay, itu boleh. Okay. So yeah, I guess, you know, if you are interested in spoken word poetry, or at least to learn more about it, there is an event. LATS is organizing an event, right? Where they'll be sharing their spoken word poetry pieces. If I'm not mistaken, it's on the 16th of November.
Yep.
And that's happening on the School of English Facebook page. So please tune in and check it out. And then I also have my social media account. So if you want to come and have a look at more of those multimedia poems that I mentioned earlier, please check out my Facebook page at Sheena Baharudin, SHEENABAHARUDIN, and the same alias is going to lead you to my Instagram account as well. Okay, that's it.
Any planning? Any upcoming shows?
Oh yeah. So you mean the one in
Langkawi?
In Langkawi.
Maybe if we have one listener in Langkawi.
Oh, that is quite true. Are you in Langkawi now? Because if you are, I'll be there in Langkawi on the 26th and 27th of November. Nice. There is going to be a musical play, so a musical theatre really, and it's called Pulau Seri. So I'll be Mahsuri. So I'll be doing spoken word poetry. I'll be collaborating with Takara Suiko, and then we're going to have Langkawi kids, students from Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan Mahsuri to be part of the cast. And it's full on. This is going to be a spectacle. It's going to be held at the Holiday Villa Resort. So if you're there, check it out, Pulau Seri by Suatu Kala on Facebook. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this first episode in a hopefully a long-running series that we'll be having with Literature and Drama Society.
Lovely.
Lads.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming, Sheena.
Thanks, Tristan.
This was great.